I'm an example of historical layer. I mean, I dedicated myself 10 years to the Buchla, performing live. And then I left it. Then I came back. I came back and there was a new instrument. It's a 200E, it's not a 200. But I'm coming back with the same desire and ambition to do just essential live performance on the Buchla with nothing else. To this day, I will say the Buchla is the most sophisticated electronic modular music system that there is. And that's why I'm back out playing it now, because there's been a renaissance of interest in interactive live performing. I grew up playing the piano. I was from a big family, 6 kids, and my mom found a beautiful Steinway piano, and I kind of hogged it. So I had it to myself. All my sisters hated me because I wouldn't let them get to it. Even as a kid, I thought of myself as a composer. So I had music paper. I didn't know how to write on it, but I wrote on it anyway. So that, I don't know where I got that. I do know that my dad loved music, but wasn't allowed to study it because he was pre-med. There's a high correlation of music with the medical field, I've noticed. A lot of good amateur musicians are doctors, and they've all been denied. Because I was from a big family, I didn't get a lot of attention. But that was the good news and the bad news, because I could hide out and I could be very independent. I wanted piano lessons. I had 1 year of piano lessons. Didn't like my teacher. It wasn't until high school when I took myself to a teacher in Boston. Then I went to Wellesley. I majored in music. I was always looking for music. Even in high school, I found a math teacher who could teach me harmony. So I hungered for it. It was what I wanted. I just didn't know how to get it. After Wellesley, I was going to become a lawyer. I took my law boards, and nobody thought about making a living in music in those days. It was kind of like a liberal arts pastime. So I thought I should be a lawyer. And it was my composition professor who would not write the recommendation for me, and I had to have that for my major. And somehow I ended up, I got a fellowship. So I was either going to study with Nadia Boulanger, and I was accepted there. That's where everybody went. But I was given money to go to California, and I wanted to be independent. So I took the money and I went to the University of California, Berkeley. I didn't even know what to expect out there. But that was the right place and the right time, because the whole world turned upside down right then, with the free speech movement and all the, the Vietnam War and the protests and women's liberation started then. They would burn mountains of bras. And, there have been many waves of women's liberation. Everything happens in these waves, But I found myself in a very powerful one at that time. And so we were always aware of confronting the obstacles. And there were obstacles. I wanted to conduct. I was told a woman had no right on the podium. I wanted to compose. I was told my pieces were too short, and what's wrong with women? Can't they write pieces, longer pieces? I said, well, I want to write a short piece, There were all these signals that one got that said, this is not a friendly environment. And that, I think, that mindset coupled with this unexpected meeting with the sources of electronic music that were available in the Tape Music Center, thanks to Moritz Subotnick. You know, I have to thank him for that, because my initial exposure to electronic music in those days was through that tape center. It was so informal. I mean, nobody was there. You would go, and technically you were supposed to pay $5 an hour, but nobody was ever there to collect the money. And they were so lovely, and when it was a summer vacation, they gave me the Moog to take home and play with, so I had that for a couple of months. So it was a very nurturing place. I got a grant through them, through Ford, to do a project. So thanks to Mort, that very unusual, unique place to get exposure to electronic music was right in my backyard. And then, of course, meeting Don Buchla, it was, you know, that settled everything. I gave up my traditional approach to composition. It was through personal connection. So I was in the music department. My boyfriend was in the architecture department. One of his professors was Harold Paris, who is a sculptor, an amazing artist. And I got to know Harold through Joseph, and Harold said, "Hey, I want you to meet my next door neighbor." So Don Buchla had the huge loft. I mean, we're talking industrial size, you know, facility next to Harold Paris, who had a huge sculpture studio there on the, you know, at the waterfront in, technically, I think it was Oakland. And so Harold took me over to Buchla's one night, and that's how I met him. I mean, when you walked into that studio of Don's, there were towers of modules all talking to you. And then I decided, you know, at that moment that that's where I had to be. Well, the reason that I went to work for Buchla is that I just really wanted to be close to it. I wanted it. I wanted anything that got me in touch with it. You know, there he was, the source, right there, Don Buchla. I wanted a Buchla. He was not a man of many words. He didn't express emotions. We would be in the studio, and he would walk around, and he actually made sounds that sounded like the Buchla. You know, he'd get a little uncomfortable, and he'd go, you know, like, I was just a kid. I was just out of school. I was terrified of everything. I was terrified of Don Buchla. I was, and feeling very not sure about anything, except that I had this passion for this instrument that I had to figure out how to make happen. But you know, we had very eccentric people working there. I remember I was sitting at that. We weren't really allowed to talk. We sat at this big wooden table, and NPR would be on. The radio station was on, and we were to work without speaking. And then we had a break. You know, it was like a union shop. You know, break for eating. And every once in a while there'd be a little conversation, and I would say something like, "I can't wait till I have a Buchla. I want the biggest Buchla there is. I can't wait to really do." And the guy across from me would say, "That's not very Buddhistic." He said, "You shouldn't have any desires. I want nothing. I want, you know." And I thought, okay, you want nothing, and I want a Buchla. So I worked for $3 an hour. I mean, it was frustrating because I realized I couldn't make enough money to buy a Buchla by working for Buchla. My boyfriend, the same one who was friends with Harold Paris, lived in Milwaukee, and a friend of his was he was doing commercials. And he hired me to do 10 commercials for Macy's for Christmas. I had no place to do them. I didn't have any equipment. I did them at Mills College, which was not legal. You weren't supposed to do, paid work there. But the cause was a just one. And I remember I hid the scripts in the drawer, and anytime somebody walked in, I'd close the drawer, and I did 10 spots for Macy's, and I was paid very well. And that started the ball rolling. Once I knew that I could make money with this electronic thing, I started looking, and I got jobs. I did spots for MJB Coffee in San Francisco, some things for Levi's. I started making money. And technology was, in those days, an expensive dependency. Even the kids today, you see that they have what we would call the addiction, like to the stuff, to the gear. And it drives you. If you want that, you figure out. I think it's just a form of addiction. I don't know. And I don't have any addictions, except that one. We love machines for many reasons. They're warm, they're responsive, they do, they're supposed to behave like machines too. They're supposed to be predictable. It's like if you do this, you get that. If you do this, you get that. Maybe you have to learn all of the interactions, but there's a promise in a machine that it's going to be predictable. The Buchla isn't always predictable, and it has a lot of, variations, but the real problem was when it broke down. And it was traumatic for me. I was in New York, Buchla was on the West Coast. Nobody could fix it. And so there I was with a dead-end situation. And there was an intervention. Friends of mine said, you've got to do something. And they got me, focused on other instruments. So I made a transition from the Buchla. And my feeling this time around, I'm running around the world with a Buchla in a suitcase. Every time I get off a plane, I have no idea if it's going to be in little pieces or if it's going to light up when I turn it on. And my feeling is this, Don, you're up there. I'll do this until it doesn't work, and then I'll just stop. I'm not going to sweat it. My music tends to honor the pitch. I'm Italian. I like melody. But I'm not talking about keyboard. So I use sequences, pitches, contrapuntal rows designed to work together vertically, horizontally, obliquely. I design pitch sets. And then I use those as raw material. So I'm less of the school of let's have fun and make noise, and more of the school of how can I improvise in an interesting way on this tonal material. Electronics gives you a control over pitches that you don't have traditionally. Okay, so traditionally, composers wrote for instruments that had whatever limitations they had. Your job as a composer was to analyze the limitations of all those instruments, maximize the possibilities within those by your knowledge of their limitations, and combine them into, a sonic whole. As a composer in electronic music, you're not dealing in that mentality at all. You still have certain sonic things that are important, like the nature of the bass, the nature of the high end, in an orchestral sense. You're dealing with the fabric the range of frequencies and balance. The fact that sounds in the bottom can be further apart, sounds in the top can be closer together. There are certain rules, not rules, but aesthetics maybe, or functionalities that happen. But in electronic music, you don't have those limitations. So I can make a sound that goes from the lowest of the low to the highest of the high instantaneously. I can make it play so fast that no human could ever play that. It's not even impressive. When you have a human playing really fast, you say, wow. And in electronics, you're free from all of that posturing. Electronics makes everything easy. If you want 12 against 15, you can do it. You don't have to torture a player. If you want the dynamics to move instantaneously. So I think traditional composition evolved into an egocentric concept of making something really impressive and difficult and challenging. My generation rebelled from that. Philip Glass, John Adams, people that said, hey, academia, that's not what it's about. And at the same time, with this electronic control of sound, you have a new vocabulary, a new language. But it has to do with really sculpting sound, sculpting pitches. But for me, what's important is the continuity of the sculpting. I don't say, oh, here's a nice sound, I'll record that. Then I'll add on another nice sound. Then I'll do this and I'll record that. It is, I'm in the moment, I'm creating this flow of sound, and I'm directing it now in the moment to do the next thing. It's a live sculpting of sound that keeps you on your feet. And that to me is what's exciting, because I'm composing, I'm in charge of the structure and the architecture and balance and everything that my composer brain says about structure. And I'm also in charge of the interaction with the machine. That's, I think, one of the attributes of live electronic music, is that you can be in the moment.